So I find it hilarious that my comments on my last movie review, Beetlejuice, I was getting cooked, wasn't I? Well, it doesn't matter because the movie wasn't that great. However, this movie, Transformers 1, I hope those same commenters come back because I enjoyed Transformers 1. Leave it up to Thor to save this franchise because it's been a while since we've seen a good Transformers movie. Alright, let's get into why I enjoyed Transformers 1. And you might be surprised to know there are some things that hold it back from being great. Let's get into it. What's going on, you guys? James here with another real review, and today we're getting into my spoiler-free thoughts on Transformers 1. A huge thank you to Paramount Pictures for giving me the chance to watch this in theaters for review, and I'm gonna be honest with you guys, that was a sold-out screening. There were kids, adults, teenagers, and we're all cheering for this movie. Yeah, we're living in 2024, and I'm so happy to say we finally have a long-awaited good Transformers movie. It's been a minute since I've said that. Now, the movie is in theaters September 20th, so you'll be able to see it for yourself very soon. And when you do, let me know in the comments down below. What did you think of this movie? Does this review make you more excited for the film? And hey, tell me once you see it, which character ended up being your favorite. The movie is directed by Josh Cooley, who also directed and wrote Toy Story 4. And yes, that movie got me in my feels. It stars Chris Hemsworth, who voices Optimus Prime, Brian Tyree Henry, who voices Megatron, Scarlett Johansson, who voices Alita 1, and Keegan-Michael who voices Bumblebee. That kind of rhymed. Now, if you don't know much about Transformers 1, here's a little synopsis for you. This is the untold origin story of Optimus Prime and Megatron, two best pals who are, well, as you know, sworn enemies. But we get a chance to see how they were before that transition into them going neck and neck against one another. So there's a lot of lore that this movie gets into. There's a lot of cool background that we learn about Megatron and Optimus Prime. So I'm really excited to dive into that and so much more of what worked in Transformers 1. So let's get into my positives, guys. And I'm going to have to start with this. I'll be honest, fully transparent, I've seen maybe 2 trailers for Transformers 1 before actually sitting down in my screening, and I wasn't actually looking forward to this movie. I thought that this film was going to tank, but instead, I walked away pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed this movie. Like I've already mentioned, it's been a while since a Transformers movie has been a win for me at the theaters, but Transformers 1 does blend a very familiar origin story between Optimus and Megatron with a unique animation style that truly grabbed me. I was against this animation style from the very first trailer and I thought, this thing stinks. But instead, it works. Like, what happened? The animation is very kid-friendly while also working within the context of these action moments that maybe us adults might appreciate a little bit more. There's also some cool moments of dialogue and these grand set pieces where you start to understand this is a beautifully crafted world by Josh Cooley. So I do want to stay with the director for a little bit now. A huge credit has to go to him because he took what I thought would have been a really poorly thought out origin story, I guess I want to say, based on the trailers, and turned it into something that I really enjoyed. And it's so funny because I wasn't on board with Toy Story 4, which he again directed before I saw the movie, and then I liked it. And it's the same thing with Transformers 1. So Josh Cooley does a very good job at being able to ramp up the action when it's necessary and then tone it down for some good character moments. He just understands how to tell a pretty solid story. And I kind of like how this movie has multiple layers that I didn't expect it to have, especially because it's really geared towards kids in some instances, but then you start to notice some subtle nuances between our characters, whether it be in the voice acting department or just based on their facial movements, and I thought, y'all, this is pretty darn decent. I'm also pretty glad that the pacing of the film was effective because it never felt too long and it never felt too short. Heck, by the end I was thinking, I want another Josh Cooley Transformers movie. So Josh, if you're watching this, are we getting another one? Because I really would love one from you. So let's move on now from the direction to the action. Oh my goodness, y'all. The action hit for me in this movie. Transformers 1 is a prime example of why you need to give movies a fair shake even if the trailers don't sell you on the product, because at the end of it all, I love what they delivered. There were some impactful action scenes, there were some really cool build up to character moments where, especially at the end with Optimus Prime, I almost cheered my darn self. The whole theater was roaring. Everyone loved this moment, and I thought, oh my gosh, this movie's making money, because I was shocked by how well they built up to that moment. They were able to basically take you from an ambitious Optimus Prime and a very timid Megatron, and then eventually you start to see the leadership qualities in both either mesh or, kind of divide them. I'm not going to spoil much here, right? So it was so cool. I was just ready to clap at times, and there was so much good payoff in this movie. Now, when it comes to the voice performances, because yes, in a film like this, you need good ones, there were a couple of standouts. I really like what Brian Tyree Henry did as Megatron and what Chris Hemsworth did as Optimus Prime. Now, Optimus Prime, or I should say Chris Hemsworth, didn't always hit for me. We'll talk about that in the negatives, but for the most part, those were the two standouts. Both actors just know how to deliver drama. Because boy, oh boy, I was at the end, I was thinking, there's some tea between Megatron and Optimus here. And because of their performances, I was so bought into their journey together that by the end, there is this scene that turns the tables, and it made me feel like I got hit in the gut. So thanks, Brian and Chris, for making this 31-year-old pretty emotional. Now, the final positive I have here is another technical note. It's really the score by Brian Tyler. Now, when I say score, of course, I mean music, because I'm a huge music buff when it comes to movies. They can make or break films for me, and Brian Tyler has been aces for a long time. In this movie, especially, I thought to myself, I'm ready to run through a brick wall. There were several moments where I was really immersed into what I was seeing because of Brian Tyler's score, especially when they do go off planet. Now, I'm not going to say too much regarding that, but there were some lush environments and some really cool interstellar travel, and I thought, heck yes, I am bought in. And then you hear the score and think, now I'm teleported. So good job, Brian Tyler. And yes, I'm still listening to your Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift soundtrack. It's an excellent score, I'm sorry. Alrighty, y'all. Well, like I said, that was my last positive, because while this movie is a surprisingly solid journey, I do think there are some negatives that hold it back from being great this movie season. So I want to say that there are no awful voice performances here, but there are some that kind of stick out like a sore thumb. I wasn't particularly a fan of the work by Scarlett Johansson, Keegan-Michael and Jon Hamm. They didn't bring a compelling performance for me. And the voice they provided for their characters, for the most part, sounded too much like their own voice. So I thought, okay, let me give them the benefit of the doubt. And after a while, I just said, it's Scarlett Johansson screaming. There's really nothing here. Or Jon Hamm just sounds like Jon Hamm. Keegan-Michael does this thing where sometimes he tries to add a little bit of flavor, but I wish he brought more Toad from his performance in Super Mario Bros. In terms of being inventive with the voice, versus him just sounding like himself to play Bumblebee. He has so many jokes. Every other line is a punchline, and they're not funny. So when we get to the second act, which is where we do get introduced to Bumblebee, I want to say that the film sort of takes a little bit of a momentum dip for me. And then eventually the third act helps resurrect the film once again. But it's the middle of the movie that sort of sinks and holds the film back, because particularly we get more exposure to these actors. And I will say, for as solid as Chris Hemsworth was as Optimus Prime, I know, here it comes. The comments, I already know, the pitchforks are coming out. But Chris Hemsworth at times would be giving a speech in what should feel like a very dramatic moment where I'm gripped and pulled in. Instead, sort of feels like it's lacking the oomph that it needs. Maybe this is Chris Hemsworth trying to keep it kind of toned down and reserved once he begins assuming that role of Optimus Prime. But I would have liked a little bit more, particularly to a speech, or in a speech to the miners at the end. So yeah, take that for what you would, but maybe you feel differently. I just didn't feel like he delivered sometimes in certain instances, but his other co-stars were a little bit worse off. And like I mentioned, the second act does tend to drag quite a bit, and this is where we get a lot of the exposition that the story, I know it needs, but boy, was it tough to keep up with. I don't mean like tough as in Tenet tough, I mean tough as in, I've never really known this about Transformers, so if you're a mega fan, it's probably easy for you to pay attention to what you're hearing and then the performance, but when we get characters like Alpha Trion, who's voiced by Lawrence Fishburne, I like to just enjoy a Lawrence Fishburne performance. That man is just so good as an actor and so solid in everything you see him in. But then you get a lot of exposition, then you get a lot of lore, and then I'm thinking, oh, okay, I'm trying to comprehend what you're saying, but also pay attention to the performance, and it can get a little tough to balance the two. Maybe that is just a me thing, but I do think that sometimes we get a little bit too heavy on the exposition in the middle of the movie, so it sort of tends to drag. But like I said, the third act is just bonkers in a good way, and then the first act is so fun. So even though the middle is a little iffy for me, I still think the movie is overall pretty darn solid. So my final thoughts on this film, guys, Transformers 1 is just, what a way to resurrect a franchise, right? Yes, the Michael Bay films had some moments, there are some cool action scenes, don't get me wrong, but as movies, only the first one for me holds water to this day. The others just are whatever, and at times horribly bad. But Transformers 1, in a way, kind of sparked something in me. Spark. But I really like that we got a brand new animation style for this franchise, a really good story, solid direction, awesome action that we could track, some good voice performances, and it was tied to the story. I was actually bought in. And by the end, I thought, is that it? I want more. And sure, there's a post-credit scene. I believe it's post-credit, maybe a mid-credit. But for the most part, this movie's really fun. And I enjoyed it. It's not summer movie season really right now. I think we're kind of getting out of it. But boy, is this movie going to crush at the box office. And I can't wait for you to see it too. So there you have it, you guys. That's my real review of Transformers 1. So if I had to rate it, it'd be like a strong 3.5. Maybe we're getting closer to that 4-star out of 5. Because the more I talk about it, the more I like the movie. And I really can't wait to hear what you have to say. So get loud in the comments down below and let me know where your hype levels are for Transformers 1 after watching this review. And hey, if you enjoyed this review, hit the big red button below and subscribe to the channel. You guys are a blessing, and I can't wait. We got Love is Blind coverage coming. We got some more Dragon Prince coverage coming. Season 7's on the horizon, and I can't wait for all the movies in between. Alrighty, y'all. Well, I'm gonna go and think about how I can't see this movie until September 20th. It's like talking about it is torture. I want to see it right now. Again, I can't wait to rewatch this movie. I'm serious. So if you see me in the movie theater, and just say hi. But y'all, again, thanks so much for watching. God bless you guys. And I'll catch you at the next screening.